record on this computer, and let's get started. All right. So we're gonna do a quick Kahoot introduction. So you can either go to kahoot.it if you're on a laptop, or you can go to the Kahoot app if you would like. But once you log in, you're going to use this game pin number 2838113. You're going to write in your little nickname. Please make sure it's appropriate and not offensive. You can make it if you want to, that's fine. And then we'll get started. 1, 2, 13. We're missing 4 people. While y'all are doing that, I'm going to go ahead and take attendance. All right, so kahoot.it, or you can use the app. All right. We have 8 so far. 10. All right, Diego's here. Amayeli, Masi, Dakota. Amber Lee is not here yet. Katarina is not here yet. Vivian Fern, Amanda Tawana, Edith, Cecilia, not yet. Dorisha, Logan, Destiny, and Dimitri. 1, 2, 3. Okay. 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 13. We got 2 more people. Let me come over and see. Oh yeah, okay. There you go. I just put that game pin in there. 2838113. There's always, maybe you've never done Kahoot before. Anybody never done Kahoot? Okay. So essentially what's going to happen is it's going to like multiple choice. The questions will come up. It'll give you answers. The answers are basically just color coded. So you're going to see a screen that has 4 colors on it, or 3 colors based on how many answers there are. So don't like freak out and think, oh my gosh, like I don't see the answers. Okay, just do it all color coded. The faster you answer, the more points you get. There's usually some really obnoxious music, but I don't know why it's not playing. What is the first stage of the management function? You just make your selection. First stage of the management function. 3 seconds, 2. All right, the answer is planning. You can't do anything if you haven't taken time to do a plan. Well, I'll take that back. You can do something, it's just probably not going to be as successful if you don't take the time to actually do a plan, put a plan together. Okay. All right, Diego's up on top. Here we go. What is the final step in the management function? Final step in the management function. 10 seconds. 3, 2, excellent. All right, that is evaluating. We have to evaluate what actually happened compared to what? No, compared to what? So yeah, the function of evaluating, right? right? We have to compare what actually happened. What are we comparing what actually happened to? To what we planned, right? Did we plan, did what we planned actually happen, or did it not happen? And then that's where we now start our new planning cycle to say, okay, this didn't happen. Let's figure out why. And what are we going to do to make it not happen again? Or how are we going to get there the next time? All right. True or false? The rack rate is the lowest rate a hotel will sell a room. True or false? The rack rate is the lowest rate a hotel will sell a room. 3, that is false, okay? The rack rate is the highest rate. The rack rate is the highest rate that we always want to try to get. All right. Diego's maintaining his lead. Here we go. Which of the following is not a guest room pricing strategy? Which one is not a guest room pricing strategy? Five seconds. 3. All right. It is first come, first serve. That's not one. The other 3 we're going to talk about in just a moment. Uh-oh, Diego. Someone's taking over your lead. Okay, information from the STAR report is used in which guest room pricing strategy? There was videos that you could have watched. There's a book you could read. The information from the STAR report is used in which guest room pricing strategy? 3, 2, 1. That is the market condition, okay? So our areas, our regions are broken into different markets, okay? I work in the downtown market. I work in the Smurf market, which is the social, military, educational, religious, fraternal. We work in different markets, okay? And so we'll talk about the STAR report and what it looks at during our class discussion today. All right, here we go. The rule of thumb approach says that a guest room with construction costs of $275,000 should be sold for how much per night? The rule of thumb approach. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, it is $275. The rule of thumb says for every $10,000 in construction costs, you should sell that for $1 for every $10,000 in construction costs. So because it's $270,000, $275 gives us our average rate, our starting rate to kind of start off at. And that's assuming that we're going to occupy, we're going to perform at 70% occupancy. Okay, if we plan on performing below or above, we can adjust that. But in the industry, when a hotel is being built or a hotel is being renovated, oftentimes they are looking at what they call the cost per key. Okay, the cost per key, essentially, this would be a $275,000 cost per key, which means every key door, like every guest room, that's what that cost is going to be. They don't say, you know, a 100-room hotel is not $27 million. They just say it's $275,000 per key. That sounds a lot better than saying I'm going to invest $27.5 million. Okay, and so oftentimes they sell it, they propose it based on the cost per key, and that will then give you an idea of what that starting rate is going to be. So luxury hotels, that's one reason why their rates are so much higher, because their cost per key for a luxury hotel like Hotel Emma or the Thompson is much higher than a La Quinta or a Hampton, okay? And so that's why all of the costs, I'm still trying to get in touch with the Thompson Hotel. I will I will share, I know that after October the 14th or October the 12th, actually, after that, we're done with this class, but it'll probably be my housekeeping class that's gonna go to Thompson, but I will post an announcement in the front office class as well for that date. So if you do wanna come, you're welcome to. Because Thompson is a beautiful, gorgeous hotel. The owners of the hotel, they have a leather, they own a leather business and I think stonework as well in Mexico. And so everything in that building is custom from their own company. So it's an absolutely beautiful property. All right. Who's Hamburger Boy? Awesome. Dimitri maintaining his lead. The Hubert formula is considered the bottom-up approach because it takes into consideration the desired sales. True or false? Hubert formula is considered the bottom-up approach because it takes into consideration the desired sales. True or false? 5, 4, 3. All right, that is false. Okay. So whoever that one person is, congratulations. Everyone else is going to say, but you're going to get some points. All right. So the bottom-up approach, it is considered the bottom-up approach. That's the true part of the statement. The false part of the statement is that it takes into consideration the desired sales. When we think about a profit and loss statement, a P&L, what's on the very bottom? The profit. Okay. So our sales is at the very top because all of our expenses have to come out of those sales. And so it's called the bottom-up approach because it looks at what our desired profit level is going to be. And then we have to work our way up all of our other expenses to then determine what do our sales need to be, how many rooms do we have, this is how much our room rate's going to be. Okay. So that's why it's called the bottom up, because it takes into consideration the desired profit. Rack rates can never change. True or false? Rack rates can never change. Halfway there. Excellent. That is false. Okay. So sometimes rack rates, they can be posted, or some jurisdictions or some areas actually require that the rack rate be posted in a hotel, right? So whenever we go on when we go to the Grand Hyatt next week, bless you. When we go to the Grand Hyatt next week, as you're leaving the guest room, look behind the door. It'll have like the evacuation plan on the back of the door, and it should also say what the rack rate for that room is. We don't always get the rack rate because oftentimes hotels are going to elevate that rack rate just so that they can accommodate for times when there is a high need or an event or things like that, right? A low supply and high demand, so that they can actually command that particular rack rate. But some areas, it's all based on where you live and like where your hotel is. Some of them can just provide a range. But in San Antonio and I believe in Texas, they have to post an actual dollar amount. All right. The following is not a KPI. Which one of the following is not a KPI? Oh, I think it's lit. 2, 1. All right, the number of guests. So we're going to talk about ADR RevPAR and occupancy percentage today. Oh, Diego reclaimed his lead. All right, ADR stands for all right, come on, 100%. Come on. Excellent. Okay, good. It's average daily rate. The STAR report compares our hotel KPIs to who? The STAR report compares our hotel KPIs to who? All right. Nobody got it right. 0. Okay, so the STAR report is a report that a hotel has to kind of pay into to receive. And what that STAR report is done by Smith Travel Research. Okay, so STAR is more like an acronym. But what that STAR report does is it takes into consideration your comp set. So you have to identify who your comp set is. Okay, and comp set stands for competitive set. It's just a short abbreviated way of saying competitive set. And so when we identify who our comp set is, we're identifying hotels that we are directly in competition with the same guest. Okay, so the Thompson Hotel, for example, they're in direct competition for the guest of the Hotel Emma, maybe the Macaro Hotel and Spa, maybe even the Grand Hyatt, because it's still part of the Hyatt brand. Right, so those larger hotels would be their comp set. It wouldn't be fair to compare the average daily rate of Hotel Emma to the average daily rate of a Comfort Suites. Okay, Comfort Suites can't command a $300 to $400 room night on average, and so you always want to be within comparing your comp set. Okay, the report would be crazy if it was every single hotel in the city. That'd be way too long. Okay. And then every hotel in the brand, probably the brand is probably going to be monitoring that, but not the STAR report. And so with the comp set, that's kind of the important part with that. So the comp set can go through, go beyond just the brand. It doesn't have to be just hotels within that brand. It can be really anybody in that region. And also the same level of service. So for example, the JW Marriott, which is up in Stone Oak, up 281 North, the La Cantera Resort, which is by Six Flags, and the Hyatt Hill Country Resort, which is out by SeaWorld, are in 3 complete different areas of the city, but they're all still resort properties. And so they're going to still be within the same comp set. Okay. We have a 200-room hotel and we sold 150 rooms last night. What was our occupancy percentage? All right. It is 75%. Sorry, I had that little decimal right there. 0.75%. So it is 35% occupancy. Oh, watch out. Tawana's creeping up to the top. 15. We show 120 arrivals and average 5% no-show rate. So we can assume there will be how many no-shows? We show we have 120 arrivals and average 5% no-show rate. So we can assume there will be how many no-shows? All right, it is 6, right? Easy way to do that. I know it's math. Easy way to do that. What's 10% of 120? 12, right? We dropped that 0. 5 is half of 10, half of 12 is 6. There's this really cool app. Let me see, I haven't played it in a long time. I think it's called Elevate. Yeah, it's called Elevate. It is so much fun. And I feel like I'm actually learning something instead of just like wasting time playing a game. I think I did pay for the subscription so I can have more access to more games. But math has always been one of my favorites. So Elevate is a really cool app if you want to download it. They do things for like language, like synonyms and words and math and reading and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool. I highly recommend it. All right, here we go. Last two questions. Which of the following adds rooms back to our inventory? Which of the following adds rooms back into our inventory? Today's Thursday, right? No, today's Tuesday. Sorry. The expected, sorry, I distracted you at the last second. I don't know why I thought it was Thursday all of a sudden. Sorry. So, expected understays. So we're going to go over this in class when we talk about the available rooms. But arrivals, right? That's going to take rooms out of our inventory. Once somebody checks in that room, it's out of our inventory. So we will see our expected arrivals for the day. Our stayovers, those are people who are not checking out, so they're still in the room. Out of order rooms definitely are out of our inventory. So the only other one that's on here is our understays. Basically, an understay is when somebody checks out early from their reservation. So if they made a reservation for 3 nights and they checked out after the second night, that's considered an understay. So now we have that room back in our inventory, we can sell it again. So yeah, so we can always look at like percentages. A lot of this when we're forecasting, we're looking at percentages. So we can see, you know, we had on average maybe 2 or 3 people understay. So the one that's the no-shows is a little bit easier to calculate because we can see exactly how many of our arrivals did not show up. So we can kind of keep that percentage going. For the understays, you might just throw like 1 or 2 in there just to kind of plan for that. All right, last question. Uh-oh. 43 points, Diego and Tawana. Even Logan, you could get up there with 500 points. You got it. Which of the following KPIs do not take revenue into consideration? Which of the following KPIs do not take revenue into consideration? All right, it is the occupancy percentage. Obviously, RevPAR is revenue per available room. RevPAG is another one, but it's not one that we normally track, but it is revenue per available guest. And then ADR is average daily rate, which goes into the revenue that we come in. So occupancy percentage. Here we go. Dorisha in 3rd place, congratulations. Tawana, that means Diego held on to his lead. All right. All right, excellent. So let me come back to PowerPoint. We're going to do chapter 12 first. We are going to kind of breeze through some of these slides because we've kind of introduced a lot of the topics. But let's see, 12, there we go. So planning, evaluating the operations. This is the 7-step kind of process for planning, that management function. So you'll see planning to the top, evaluating to the bottom, and everything we have in between. So first we have to make our plan, okay? Then we have to organize kind of our hotel into different departments. We have to coordinate whose responsibilities are going to be whose. We have to then staff those departments. We have to lead those departments. We have to set the expectation for those staff, tell the staff exactly what our plan is, what their responsibilities are. Controlling means we have to kind of keep them on track. And then last but not least, we evaluate, okay? So we evaluate what we planned didn't happen. And so oftentimes we have, oh, this isn't a touch screen. This is going to be interesting. Okay. We have this graph right here, and we have kind of what we plan to do. This is our goal up here. And then let's say we gotta go through, we look at our past history, we look at all of our information, all of our data. We started down here and we go, and we don't quite meet our gap or meet our goal, okay? This section right here between our goal and where we started, this section right here is what's called a gap analysis, okay? We have to analyze, we have to do an analysis. Why is this gap the way it is? Where are we starting, where we want to get to? And we have to analyze what we're missing so that we can achieve our goal. And what you'll notice is that from start to finish, gap closes, okay? So maybe we didn't quite meet our goal, but our gap is a lot smaller than it was before. So now we start all over again. Our gap is here. What do we do in the gap analysis? What do we need to do to make sure that we can actually achieve our goal? Let me test see if this works. Nope. No. Okay, so planning is the most important. Organizing, I kind of already went through each one of these. Evaluating is one of the most important steps, okay? Planning is the most important to start, because otherwise, if we don't know where our goals are, we don't even know where we're going or what we need to do to get there. Evaluating is important for us to make sure that we know why we didn't achieve our goal, or what did we do to achieve our goal, and what worked, what didn't work. So the next time we come around to our planning, we know how to adjust our plan, okay? So when we talk about our room rates and establish what our room rates are, typically we're going to have rate categories. We all know we have rate categories, like we have an in-road, whether it's a single or a double or a suite, or what are some of our other, there's 7 different room rates that we have in in-road. Single, queen, king, king suite, and there we go. Excellent. Right, and so all those rates are based on, especially if it's like a king suite or a deluxe suite, it's going to be a higher rate. The room rate also can be determined by where the room is in the hotel. Okay, so for example, one of my absolute favorite hotels is the Hotel Valencia, downtown San Antonio, and their presidential suite is actually on the 3rd floor, whereas most presidential suites are on the top floor of the building. Theirs is on the 3rd floor, because they figured out if you are on the Riverwalk, you don't want to be far away from the Riverwalk, you want to be as close as possible. Okay, so obviously the presidential is the most expensive, usually runs for about $5,000 a night. Then they have their junior suites, which are just like the presidential, but a little bit smaller. Then they actually have their courtyard rooms. And so the Hotel Valencia on the 3rd floor has an interior courtyard, and all the rooms kind of surround it. And so all of those rooms are actually at a premium rate, even more so than the Riverview rooms, because it's such a nice little kind of quaint ambiance. And they have little patios you can sit out there. It's really, really gorgeous. So all the room rates, there's no like set way that says this is what you need to do for your room rate. You have to kind of think about, what does the room offer? What is the view like? What are the amenities in the room, right? At Hotel Emma, in the traditional room, they have this normal size or like traditional size hotel amenities. In all the suites, they have like full size bottles of the spa amenities, right? And so because you're paying a higher rate, the amenities are a little bit nicer. So all of that kind of goes into consideration. Do they? I've never used that before. Does it? Okay.
It's like $35.
Is that what they use? Is that what they use in their
No, they're like candles are like $50. Sanitizers like
literally burn $50 in a candle? Yes. You know, I went to. It's funny you said that. I went to my friend's 40th birthday party this past weekend in Tyler, and the house that we went to, she was a little pretentious. But the candle that she had in her bathroom, I was like, oh my gosh, this smells just like my favorite candle. It's actually the scent that I have in my office, the little waxes that I mail to my office. And I told her, and she was like, that candle cost me like $45, $50. And I'm like, oh, you can go to Kohl's and get that for like $12. And then she took me into her other bathroom, and I was like, oh, this is blue citron from Kohl's. I was like, you need to go to Kohl's and get your candles, because I don't know about paying $40 for a candle.
They're handcrafted.
That's true. Okay. So different categories that we have. The rack rate obviously is our highest rate that we want to get. We've talked about a variety of different rates throughout the semester. So what is incentive? What is the incentive rate? What do you think that might be? Okay, so it is traditionally a cheaper rate. It's going to be similar to the group rate. Does anybody know what incentive travel is? It is incentive. Yeah. So let me give you an example of incentive travel. And once I tell you, you're probably gonna realize what, like, understand what it is. The company I used to work for, Adventures in San Antonio, we did incentive travel for Mahindra Tractor Company. Okay. So Mahindra Tractor, the US, it's an India-based tractor company. They have a USA component. And so every dealership that bought 40 or sold 40 Mahindra tractors in a year, because they sold 40 tractors, they got a free trip for 2 to wherever we were going that year. If it was their first time ever doing it, they had to go to India and see the Mahindra factory. After that first year, wherever we were planning that, some years we did a Mediterranean cruise, some years we went to the Caribbean, some years we went to Hawaii. And so basically that incentive travel is often in the sales aspect, right? So I have the incentive to sell 40 tractors because I'm going to get this free trip, okay? The free trip, if the company's doing it right, is built into the cost of those 40 tractors or whatever your sales goal is, right? So the company is not really out any money. The person, because of their sales efforts, have essentially paid for their own trip, okay? And so that's incentive travel. The difference between incentive travel and group travel is that oftentimes incentive travel is like wine and dine and all expenses paid, because they've worked hard to reach that goal, and now they expect to be wine and dine and have these amazing experiences, right? And so oftentimes those incentive travels are going to be at resort properties, high-end properties, whereas group, we still are going to have like that room rate, but then sometimes they're not going to do as much in food and beverage or all those kinds of things. So we might have a different rate. Family packages. So we can always put packages together when we're talking about different rates. The internet rate and complimentary, we've talked about those as well. So these three, let's kind of go into these three different pricing strategies. Again, the market is the area where you are, okay? It is illegal to price fix, okay? You cannot call up your competitor and say, hey, what are you selling your room for tonight? Let's both do $150. That's price fixing. You cannot do it. It's illegal. You cannot discuss it, okay? I am part of an event management group for San Antonio. And at one point they were in this conversation of like, how much do you charge for a DJ? How much? And I'm like, y'all need to pump the brakes, because if somebody were to see this, they could construe it as price fixing, and you could all get in trouble.
That's the thing you caught, right?
Yeah, it's only if you get caught, but you don't want to get caught.
That's why you pay someone else to go do it. It doesn't work for them.
Well, and so to kind of get around that, one thing we have is the star report, right? Each person is putting up their information, and the star report doesn't really give the names of the hotels, like the hotel A, B, C, and D. So you kind of just know how yours is performing within your comp set, right? So there's not really any kind of price fixing there. But something else that we used to do is I would like part of my job at the front desk working was to get onto Orbitz, which is kind of crazy because like Orbitz was like this new thing back in 2009. And so I have to get on Orbitz and I'd have to see where our hotel is, like which page number it's on. Is it the 4th or 5th listing? Because once you get past that second page, people aren't going to be checking out your hotel, right? People don't click that far deep into the search results. And so every day I had to get on and see where was our hotel, what page was on, what listing was it, and see how that, impacted. And we could also see what our competitors were showing their rates are at Orbitz for that discounted rate. So the star report looks at the ADR, the RevPAR, and the occupancy. Okay, in revenue management, next semester, we'll go into more detail with the star report and kind of what we look at. But essentially what we want to see is, what did I do compared? Like if for example, let's say my ADR is the highest. I have the highest ADR, but my occupancy percentage is the lowest. Maybe that tells me that I was charging too much, right? And so people weren't booking my rooms. My competitor had a lower ADR, but they filled more rooms than me. They had a higher occupancy percentage. So that's what we use that star report for, is to kind of look and see how are we doing compared to our competitors. And sometimes, again, like my friend at the Valencia Hotel, one of our site visits, our field trips, she mentioned that sometimes you have to sacrifice your occupancy for the sake of your ADR. And what she meant by that is that because she's a luxury boutique hotel, okay, she doesn't want to drop her ADR so far that it attracts the wrong clientele, okay? Because, what's that? That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. I mean, if you think about like our human trafficking thing that we went through a couple of weeks ago, the higher end hotels are just as much at risk of having that be an issue than the lower budget hotels. But we don't want, when what she said, and she actually did say that, she's like, she calls them soccer moms and ice chests, right? She doesn't want soccer moms and ice chests rolling up with the lobby, because the other guests in the hotel that are accustomed to staying at luxury boutique hotels and paying that higher rate, we don't want people rolling through the lobby with ice chests. It just changes the vibe of the hotel. And not that you don't want to ever turn people away, right? But, and it's not, and one time I just was like, that's discrimination. It's not really discrimination, because there are other hotels that fit that clientele, right? And so the Valencia Hotel is a small boutique hotel. It's one that people want to go away and get away from things and have some privacy and have a quiet romantic weekend or getaway. They don't want kids running around up and down. For that purpose, they don't have very many double rooms. They have primarily king rooms, because that's the clientele they're going after, right? And so, and then I have other people that I've talked to. They're like, well, whatever, I don't care. I don't want money, right? Occupancy isn't money. My ADR is money. My RevPAR is money. So that represents revenue. Occupancy, I don't really care too much about. So sometimes you have like different conflicting views. So it's important for you to know what your manager, what your GM's goals are. And that's what's established in that planning stage. Logan, do you have a question? Okay, can I see a hand from the back?
I was just gonna say, like during this, I noticed like a lot of like the plans and stuff were like super cheap. But if you look into like the Four Seasons or Hotel Emma, prices never went down. Like their prices stayed the same. And I was always like needing to see maybe the price down and we can stay, but. they
Yeah.
have to lower the price.
Yeah.
Do that kind of thing.
You know, and it's interesting that you say that because there are some hotels that did not lower their rates and they were still relatively full. And now I was talking to one of the GMs a couple weeks ago at the HAMG Hotel downtown. And he was saying he has just as much money, just as much revenue as 2019, but it's lower occupancy. He's actually being able to get a higher rate right now because people still want to travel. They haven't traveled for a year and a half, and now they're willing to spend a little extra money on that hotel room. So he's getting the same amount of revenue from 2019, but at a lower occupancy rate. So it's pretty wild. Yes.
That reminds me, like in Seattle in that area, like in February 2020, like when COVID started to get bad, they didn't really have like, quarantine zones, they didn't really create those yet, so they actually just paid hotels in Seattle, be like, hey, I know you're a luxury hotel, but we need you, your government money, obviously I'm gonna pay you, please help.
Yeah.
And they actually, like, most of the people that were staying in the hotels were in the beginning. It was a big thing, it was like a joke around there, like, you get COVID, so you stay at the nice hotel.
Stand by hotel. Awesome. Excellent. The rule of thumb, again, that's just basically $1 for every $1,000 in construction. Okay. So if we think about this room right here, we're thinking of this room as a hotel room. Okay. Every chair has a price tag. Every desk has a price tag. Every piece of equipment has a price tag. And so whatever that cost of construction for that one room, that cost per key would be, for every $1,000, it's $1 in room rate at a 70% occupancy. Okay. So that was just pretty straightforward. The Hubert formula, again, it goes, we look at that P&L, the property and loss. P&L is the profit and loss statement. We look at that P&L, and with that, let's see if this works. There we go. So our profit and loss statement, okay? So with our P&L, we have sales at the top. We have all of our expenses, this is very abbreviated, and then we have profit or loss in the bottom. So we subtract all of our expenses from our sales, like our labor, all of our materials, like our linens and our amenities in the guest room. All those stuff, we subtract all those expenses. At the bottom of it, we have a P&L, a profit or loss, okay? Very abbreviated. Your P&L statement is very abbreviated from your full spreadsheet of all of your costs and your expenses, right? So it's much more condensed. It's an easy way to kind of look at that. We're looking at our forecasting of our room availability, okay? Our room availability, what we're forecasting, so forecasting is planning for the future based on past experiences. Okay, based on our past sales. Okay, and so what we're doing, when we're thinking about our forecasting, our room availability, how many rooms we have available, we want to think about what does this particular number, what does this thing do to our inventory? Does it add to it or does it take away? So arrivals, does that add or take away from our inventory? It takes away our arrivals, right? Somebody's showing up and they're going to check into that room. So I can go in my computer system, I can look at my property management and say, okay, I have 50 arrivals today. That's how many expected arrivals I have. Okay, so it's going to subtract. What about our walk-ins? It's going to subtract. They're going to take a room away from us. What about our stayovers? Good. What about no-shows? That adds back into our inventory. Okay, they're not going to show up. So now I have that room to sell. Understays, we already talked about, is adding our checkouts. Once those rooms are clean, it's going to add it back into our inventory. And then expected overstays. It's going to subtract. if we know what an understay is, what's an overstay? Okay, staying past their original checkout date, okay? We can't always accommodate for an overstay because we may be sold out, okay? But if we have it available, they can absolutely extend. I can't remember if I shared it in this class or not, but I went to I was in Philadelphia and it was a DoubleTree, and the guest in front of me wanted to extend, they wanted to overstay. But they had actually originally made the reservation through an OTA, an online travel agency. Okay, and so that front desk agent had to explain they had to actually close out that reservation and start a brand new one. They couldn't just simply change the date on it because now they were in-house and they had to pay the actual rate, not the negotiated rate that the third party had done. So overstays is something that they absolutely can do. Okay, out of order, stay over reservations, those are the arrivals. Reservations, no-show percentage, understays and overstays. Okay, so let's do an example real quick. Let's start with a 500-room hotel. Okay, 500-room hotel, that's how many rooms we have available. Okay, how many out-of-order rooms do we have? 6 out-of-order rooms. What about stayovers? 17. I'm gonna go with 4. Reservations. Only 9. Let's add a 0 to that. 90 reservations. How about no-show percentage? 2%. Somebody other than Diego, you're really excited. Okay, Marisha's going with Diego, 2%. Okay. Understays. 3, understays are in numbers. Let's go with 3. And then overstays. 5. Okay. So now let's take this into consideration. Okay, we have to start with 500 rooms. We subtract 6, so we're at 494. So you could do all of this at once. I'm just gonna do it step by step. Subtract 4 more, we're at 490. Okay, we subtract our 90 reservations coming in, so we're at 400. Our reservation no-show, actually, let's just do our overstays real quick. So 5, so we're at 395. Okay, we're going to add back in our understays. So 398. And then what's 2% of 90, right? So the reservations are 2% of the reservations. So 1% would be no. 9.9, right? 1% would be 0.9, or would be 9. I can't math today. 90 times 0.02 is 1.8. Yeah, 0.9. Okay, so that technically is 2 rooms. So I'm going to add those back in, and I can forecast that I still have 400 rooms to sell. I really hope this is not the day before the arrivals, and I'm operating at 20% occupancy. That would be awful. Okay. Although during COVID, I had some friends in the hotels, they were operating at 10% occupancy. So that was not uncommon during the pandemic. But hopefully, so as we're forecasting in revenue management, as we're forecasting, we're always looking forward, right? So we're looking a week out, a month out, 3 months out, 90 days out, right? So we're looking at those different time frames. There's a word called our pace of build. A phrase called, oh, sorry. There we go. It didn't work either. Our pace of build, okay? That's basically what is our pace at? How much are we booking at what pace? We do it with groups. We also do it with our traditional rooms as well, okay? So when we're talking about our different KPIs are different occupancy ratios. We're looking at ADR, the occupancy percentage, and the RevPAR. So let's look at each one of those. The occupancy percentage is just the number of rooms that are occupied divided by the rooms that are available. Okay, so in our example, remember we had 400 rooms available. So how many rooms are occupied of our 500? We have 100 rooms occupied, right? So 100 divided by 500 equals 0.2, right? And so when we move that decimal place over 2 spots, we're occupying at a 20% occupancy. Okay, so it's just the number of rooms that are occupied minus the rooms that are available. The other time that this might change, oftentimes, like if a hotel is undergoing renovation and they close an entire floor out for renovation, they'll take those rooms out of their inventory. So let's say I have 25 rooms on a floor, I could essentially take this to 475, and it would give me a more accurate occupancy percentage. I don't have those rooms to sell, they're out of order, okay? So some hotels might do that in those particular cases. But traditionally, it's just the number of rooms that are in the hotel, okay? The average daily rate is our total revenue divided by the number of rooms sold. So I sold those 100 rooms, I get all the revenue, because remember, we don't charge the same rate for every single room. Some rates are a little bit smaller, some rates are higher, some of them are like right there in the middle. And so we want to take into consideration all the revenue that we brought in from the rooms and divide it by the number of rooms that were sold. It's our ADR, average daily rate. Okay. We can break this down ADR based on the room type. We can break it down based on the hotel in general. There's lots of different ways we can break down this ADR to determine what our average rate was. RevPAR per available room, revenue per available room. RevPAR is a way that we can compare ourselves to our competitors in our star report. Okay. I may have 500 rooms. My competitor may only have 300 rooms, right? And so what we can do is we can actually take the revenue that each one of us brought in, divide it by the number of rooms that we have, and it puts me on a level playing field. I obviously have 200 more rooms to sell. And so I've got to get those rooms filled if I don't want my RevPAR to suffer. There's only one condition when your RevPAR and your ADR are equal. Traditionally, your RevPAR is always lower than your ADR, okay? What is the one condition where your RevPAR, what do you think? The one condition where your RevPAR and your ADR are going to be exactly the same? What do you think?
Smart people.
All right, so what are we doing? What are we doing in RevPAR? We're dividing by the number of available rooms, right? So if we were divided by 500, that's what we're doing for RevPAR. So what in ADR, if we're doing ADR and we're using that 500 as our rooms that were sold, what does that mean we did that night? We sold out. We have 100% occupancy. So the only time that ADR and RevPAR are going to be the same is when you have 100% occupancy. Because you're taking the same dollar amount, the same revenue amount, and dividing it by the same number of rooms. That's why your RevPAR is always lower except for that sellout situation. Because in ADR, I might divide by 350 rooms, right? So I get a little bit larger number. But in RevPAR, it's 500 rooms. I'm dividing that same number, that same revenue number by a larger number, so it's smaller. So RevPAR is traditionally lower than ADR. Rate per guest, we're not really gonna go into that. The income statement, we talked about a little bit with the P&L. Planning for disasters. Okay, this is the last topic of this chapter. Every hotel should have a disaster plan. Okay, every hotel should have a disaster plan specific for the disasters that are in their area. My sister lives in New Orleans. Okay, hotels in New Orleans obviously have hurricane plans. There's a whole process. When they know a hurricane's coming, they're gonna pull in all of the furniture from the patio so that nothing can act as a projectile. They're going to secure all the windows in the hotel. They have a specific plan in action when they know that a hurricane is coming. Okay. Fires, we can't necessarily plan for those and anticipate those. But we need to know what should happen in the event of a fire. Okay. So all of your planning for your disasters, those plans should be done on a regular basis. They should be reviewed on a regular basis. The fire department will actually, if you call the fire department in the area, they'll actually come in and do training for your team members on fire extinguishers. They'll come in and evaluate your fire escape plan and give you any feedback on whether or not you need to adjust it or change it. Same thing with local police officers. They might be able to come in and look at your property and see if there are areas that are prone to potential crime areas. They can kind of give you an idea of what you can do to help kind of prevent those. But planning, that's part of that planning stage, is planning for disasters. One of the disasters that, as things changed, what was it, just a couple years ago, wasn't Hurricane Harvey that went through Houston, right? I'm sure a lot of those hotels didn't have flooding evacuation plans, but now they do, because they've gone through a disaster like that, and now they do know what do I need to do different next time, okay? And so sometimes we get disaster plans because we've experienced a disaster. All right. That is it for chapter 12. And let's just breeze right through chapter 13. A lot of this is going to be very similar. Because chapter 13 deals with one of my absolute favorite subjects. It deals with revenue management. Revenue management is kind of still relatively new. It was not really well established when I was a student in 2009. I think if it had been even more established, then I probably would be a revenue manager today. And one reason why I love revenue management is because the purpose of revenue management is to sell the right room to the right guest on the right day for the right price. It's all about strategy. It's all about taking and looking at what the environment is in the area, what the market is like, and be able to set that rate and determine what rate are we actually going to sell our rooms at. And at what point do we need to adjust our rate? Do we need to adjust it up? Do we need to adjust it down? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about revenue management. One of the disadvantages of looking at only occupancy and only average daily rate is that to get it independently, they don't really mean a whole lot. We have to make sure that we're comparing them to what? If I take an ADR of 209, right? ADR of 209, is that a good ADR? What do you think? Yes or no? Thumbs up, thumbs down? What do you think? Is a 209 a good ADR?
No. Yes.
Logan, you say no. Why? Because he said no. Okay. Who says yes? Dorisha, sorry, Dorisha. Dorisha says maybe, okay. Why? It depends on the room, okay? Depends on the room. It also depends on what we budgeted. If we planned for a 250 ADR, is 209 good or bad? It's bad, right? But if we plan for a 199 ADR, then 209 is good. So this idea of comparing our average daily rate, looking at only average daily rate, only occupancy percentage, it only makes sense when we have a number to compare it to, what we planned. If we don't plan anything, then we don't know whether it's good or bad. And so that's one of the major roles of a manager in that leadership function, is that you have to set that plan and then you have to compare what you actually did. Okay. So when we're looking at occupancy and average daily rate, we talked about this a little bit already. We may decrease our rate. If we decrease our rate, what's that going to do to our occupancy? Hopefully, it's going to go up, right? Because if we lower our rate, it might attract more people to buy. It's not going to be a higher occupancy. But if we raise our rate, it might drop our occupancy. People might stop renting or stop making reservations because our rate's too high, right? And so just looking at those two things, that's where revenue per available room comes into play. And that's where revenue management as a whole comes into play, because we're not just looking at the room revenue, we're looking at all the other money that comes into play as well. So what are some examples? Let's see, Anna Yelly, what is an example of a place in a hotel other than the room that a guest can spend money? At the bar, yes. Okay. What else? Restaurant. You can just shout them out. The spa. The gift shop. All right. Set parking, absolutely. Okay, so these are all considered outlets. These are other areas where people can spend money in our hotel. And so revenue management looks at the overall spending, not just the room rate, right? So when we consider a group, having a group in house, is that group going to spend money on food and beverage that our leisure travelers are not going to spend money on? So when I go to this conference coming up here in November, we have a $20,000 minimum food and beverage minimum. We have to spend the minimum $20,000 on food and beverage. If we don't spend that, let's say our restaurant and our banquet tab only comes to $18,000, we still have to pay them the extra $2,000 for nothing. We got nothing out of it. Come on, we can go get some. That's what I mean. That's right. Like it's like, okay, at this conference, they just put the registration out, I think like a week ago. I'm like, holy cow, they're like a week, we're a month and a half away. And I'm like, you better believe I'm gonna be there because we're gonna have some amazing food. We gotta spend 20 grand.
Right.
And there's only 50 people there. We're gonna be eating real good for $20,000, right? I'm okay with that. So revenue management takes all of that into consideration. Revenue management is used in all of these different industries. A lot of them are hospitality, but the reason why they are used in this is because we have a perishable product. What does perishable mean? It expires, it goes bad, right? I cannot sell tonight's room tomorrow. Once midnight happens, I can't retroactively go and get money for tonight's room. My room expires. I have a new room tomorrow, but I cannot get money from today's room if I don't sell it. If I don't put somebody in a car and that car sits on my lot, I'm not getting money from it. Once that cruise ship leaves port, I can't just plop someone on that cruise ship in the middle of the cruise. Once it leaves, I can't sell that stateroom anymore, right? And so that's one of the biggest characteristics of revenue management is the perishability of our product. It deals with the supply and demand concept. Okay. We look at the demand of specific market segments. So as a revenue manager, I'm going to be looking at my transient or leisure market. I'm going to be looking at my group market. Okay. And is there a high demand? Like right now, there's not really a high demand for groups.
Right.
That's pandemic related, but also we're kind of getting to that point where people are going back to school. People aren't doing conventions right now during this traditional time of the year, right? Same thing happens in December and January. People are celebrating holidays. They're not having their conventions and their meetings. And so that time period, our group business is really low. So we're relying on transient. But then come spring break, after spring break happens, from like mid-March until June, we want to go back to that group business because our transient isn't happening, okay? And so the revenue manager kind of just balances all of that and they look and see. The other thing that the revenue manager wants to look at is they don't want to have these peaks and valleys, okay? They want to kind of keep their group maybe a little bit more steady. Same thing with their transient. Because what happens is, if I get a group of 300 people, and I don't have enough space for my transient guests, the transient guests may not book in this time period. And so now, because I've filled my room too much with group, now I don't have enough rooms on the side to allow the transient guests to stay. So it is kind of like a shuffle. It is kind of like a game that you play to figure out who is the right guest on the right day for the right price and the right room. And here we go. The right product, okay, the right room, the right customer, on the right day for the right price. My friend who owned the Comfort Suites right down here on Live Oak, just before you get to 37, during Final Four Men's Final Four 2018, she sold her rooms for $500 a night at a Comfort Suites with a 4-night minimum. That means they had to stay 4 nights. If their team lost in the first round of the tournament, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for staying with us. Drink some of your sorrows away. I don't know what to tell you, right? They're guaranteed that 4-night minimum. We'll talk about that at the end of this chapter. But basically what they're doing is, I don't want someone that's going to come in for 1 night and take away that room for someone who would stay for the 4 nights, right? And so we set minimums on our stays. When I did one of the first few years that I was running the rock and roll half marathon here in San Antonio, the starting line used to be on Market Street between the Marriott and the Hyatt. And so I wanted to stay at the Hilton Palacio Del Rio. They had a 2-night minimum at $300 a night. I was like, I'm not about to drop my monthly rent on 2 nights just so I can walk out of my hotel and go to the start line. I'll drive downtown. But they don't want me to come in and just pay 1 night at $300 and hold up that room, and they'll have to turn it away if they're sold out on Friday. They can't book someone who wants to stay Friday and Saturday. So that's why we do those stay controls. We already talked about this a little bit. Different areas within revenue management that we can capitalize on. The forecasting, we utilize our property management system to forecast. We can look to see what reservations are coming up. We can look to see what our past groups that are in-house, we can look to see what our past no-show rate was, okay? Because in revenue management, we actually potentially are going to book higher than 100%. I might make reservations for 102%. Because I'm going to assume that I have cancellations or no-shows. My goal as revenue manager is to get as close to 100% as possible, or to hit 100% as often as possible, right? And so by selling a couple extra rooms, because I hope that somebody's going to cancel or not show up, I'll be right at 100. If I book for 100% and I have no shows, I'm no longer at 100%. Okay, that's what we call capacity management. That is one of the most challenging things when I talk to industry people, like, hey, what do I need to tell my students? One of the biggest things that they want me to talk to y'all about is capacity management. Because they don't, a lot of times the students go in there like, I can't sell for over 100%. Because if we sell over 100%, what do we have to do if everybody shows up? We have to walk them. We gotta walk them. We gotta send them to a different property. And so when we walk them to a different property, that's tough. That's a tough situation for your front desk to be in. So if you as a revenue manager, if you're consistently overbooking your hotel, right? If you're consistently overbooking your hotel, that puts a lot of strain on the front desk. And so you have to kind of find that balance. If it's Valentine's Day on a Saturday, you better not oversell your hotel. Because if you do, chances are all the people that you would normally walk to are also sold out. So you have to know what's going on in the market, okay? Discount allocation, as a revenue manager, you have to know when it's time to turn off different discounts. Now, there are some contracted discounts that say there's no blackout dates. You cannot close out our discount. But for most discounts, there is, once we hit a certain percentage, occupancy percentage, we can turn that off. Okay, so like employee rates eventually get turned off if we're at such a high occupancy. Remember, the higher the occupancy, typically the higher our rate those last few available rooms are. I don't want to sell a $35 room if somebody's going to come in and pay me $250 for that room. Okay, and so those discount allocations need to be turned off. During Fiesta, when I was a student and doing my internship at La Quinta, I got all these phone calls. I told you the story about the phone calls for the HEB rate. Okay, so HEB had a corporate rate of, I think it was $80. Okay, our rate during the second weekend of Fiesta was going for $199. Okay. So I get a phone call. I want to book my HEB rate. Okay, great. Let me take your reservation. 2 minutes later, I want to book a reservation for HEB. Okay, great. Let me get your reservation. 2 minutes later, I want to book a room for the HEB rate. Okay, great. The span of like 10 minutes, I took 6 reservations or so, all for the HEB rate. And I look and I'm like, dang, these people are doing a good deal. $80 from $199 rate. And back then, I grew up in San Antonio. I didn't really know what Fiesta was. I didn't know what Fiesta. The only time we went to Battle of Flowers and my siblings were playing in the marching band. Otherwise, it wasn't like a family tradition for us, right? So I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And so I look and I asked our revenue manager, I was like, hey, I just took like 6 reservations for HEB rate. And her rate's $199. And she was like, oh my gosh, I forgot to close out that specific rate, that discount. So she went in to close it out. Sure enough, somebody calls. I want to make a reservation for the HEB rate. I'm so sorry, that rate's no longer available. Oh, but my friends just called. I said, yes, your friends were lucky they got the last one. But unfortunately, right now, because our occupancy is such that we are going to close out that rate. It's no longer available. But I can get you this room for $199. No, that's too much. Okay, I mean, I know you're gonna put 10 people in there, why don't you charge each one of them $20? And then you get the $199, like you're all good. Right. Pocket yourself $1. So anyways, but that discount allocation and then duration control. Okay, that duration control of how many rooms we can actually sell, how many nights they need to stay, those different types of things. All right, so RevPAR. And I left my book in my office. Dimitri, can I borrow your book for a moment, please? The 9th edition? That's perfect. That's the one I want. Okay.
It was $4.99. I had to give it.
That's okay. It's the same one in each one. It's just I have the page number in front of this one. All right. So in the textbook here, the one thing I also love about revenue management is that because it is math-based, you can actually determine like if you want, we have what are called these discount grids. If I want to discount my rate, let's say my occupants, my rooms aren't moving, they're not picking up, I'm not making any reservations, right? I can look at this current occupancy rate. If I'm at 65%, okay, and I want to reduce my rate by 10%, then that means if I'm going to reduce my rate by 10%, I need to achieve a 73.2% occupancy in order to keep the same amount of money. Okay. If I'm not going to achieve that 73.2% occupancy, then there's no point in me lowering my rate. Because if I lower my rate and I don't get to 73.2, then I'm actually losing money. And so that's one thing I love about revenue management, is you can actually determine what happens if I lower my rate, or what happens if I raise my rate, right? And so this discount grid, we're looking at, if I want to decrease severely by 30%, I'm at 65%, I need to almost sell out to maintain the same amount of revenue, same amount of money, right? And so having these discount grids are really helpful because you can just point on two sides and connect the dots. Other than that, you have to actually do the math every single time, which is possible, but it just takes a lot more work. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the elements of our revenue management strategies. I've talked about this a little bit already. You're welcome. Thank you. Our group room sales versus our transient room sales. Okay. If we have, let's say we have a group in-house, okay, over these couple of days. We have what's called our shoulder dates. Our shoulder dates are the dates on either side of the group arrival and departure. Okay. And so oftentimes we want to focus on these shoulder dates to get people in there, especially if our group is taking up a lot of our inventory. If we focus on these shoulder dates, then one strategy that we can actually do for the shoulder dates, for example, this conference I'm going to in November, it starts on Sunday. Saturday, the room rate at the hotel I looked online is $350. But for the group, they gave us a $159 rate, right? So the revenue manager agreed to a lower rate on a Saturday because it's a shoulder date. It gets me in there a little bit earlier in the conference, right? A date that they normally wouldn't have sold. Or they do the same thing after the conference is done. After the group is done, they may offer a lower rate to encourage people to stay maybe 1 or 2 days after the group. So that way they can do all their sightseeing and stuff. So let's go through each one of these. Group rates we already talked about. When we are looking at our groups, we want to look at our booking data, like how many rooms did they say they were going to fill and how many did they actually fill. That booking pace I talked to you a little bit about, and you can say, hey, meeting planner, you need to call all your people because you're not booking your rooms when you need to. If you don't book your rooms the way you need to, we have this wonderful thing called attrition. It's wonderful for the hotel, not so wonderful for the group. Attrition is what they have to pay if they don't fill their room rent, their room obligations. Okay. So again, that's like just like money that we get. If they say they're going to fill 100 rooms, they only fill 90. They're going to pay us for those other 10 rooms, whether somebody stays in them or not. It's called attrition. It's built in to the contracts of groups. So it's there to protect the hotel because we're holding those rooms away from our other inventory. We're holding it out of our inventory. People can't make those reservations, okay? So we always want to make sure that we have all of that information. So our booking data, we can look to see what exactly they did. The wash factor, those are additional rooms they may or may not need, okay? That wash factor is a little bit different from what the guarantee of what they sell us are, that they tell that they need. The lead time is basically the time that from the time that they make their first call. Hey, David, I'm a meeting planner. I want to have my group at your hotel. Okay, when is your group coming? We're coming in December. Okay, so we have October, November, December. That's a 3-month lead time. Okay, some hotels, larger conferences, they have 2, 3, 4-year lead times. Okay, and so understand what the lead time is. Those groups that have like a 4-year lead time, we can't necessarily guarantee a rate, but we can look and see what our rate was at a specific time, and then add for inflation for the next 4 years to be able to give them an estimated rate for those specific dates. One thing we won't talk about it in this class, but we will in chapter 7 in revenue management next semester. It's called displacement. If by taking a group, we have to displace our transient guests, there's an actual formula, an actual dollar amount that we can identify how much money we would actually lose or gain if we took this group versus not taking the group. Okay. Because we look at all those different aspects that our transient guests maybe don't eat in our restaurant all the time, but our group is definitely going to be having food and beverage. Dynamic packaging is where we partner with other organizations like airfare or rental cars, right? Those packages can kind of come together and we can kind of book them all together. Our part of our rate goes in with that. Transient rates, those are our vacationers, okay? Our leisure travelers. Again, they have different needs. Oftentimes our transient rate is a little bit lower than our group rate or our corporate rate because transient are the people who are paying out of their own pocket. With a corporate rate or a group rate, oftentimes it's people who are traveling on the company and the company's paying for it. And so transient rates sometimes, not always. For example, this hotel, the San Luis I'm going to in November, the transient rate is $350 for the night, and I'm getting it the group rate of $159 because they're a resort property. They cater most to the transient guests. We want to consider all different revenue streams, okay? The concessions is something else that the revenue manager has to take into consideration. Concessions are basically like when someone is booking a room or a group business at a hotel, they may want their meeting space comped. That's a concession. You're not going to charge them their meeting space, or they may want like a VIP suite to have like a hospitality suite in, okay? And so those concessions take away money from us. They take away revenue potential from us. And so we have to kind of build that in. That's why, for example, this hotel we're going to in November, we have a $20,000 food and beverage minimum. If we don't reach that, then they're going to charge us for our room rates, like for our conference rooms. But if we reach $20,000, they're not gonna charge us for our conference rooms, okay? Because technically the cost of those conference rooms is built into that $20,000. That's why if we don't spend it, we have to pay for those rooms, okay? So they're always going to be asking for concessions. It's important as a revenue manager to understand what those concessions are. It's also important for revenue managers to know different local events, like Fiesta's happening, rodeo happens in February. We have the Dia de los Muertos celebration in October. We have the lighting of the Riverwalk in the holiday time period. So, right, so revenue managers need to be aware of those different events that are happening so that they can price their rooms accordingly. Same thing with special events. One of the last things we're going to talk about is the fair market share. Okay, I can determine based on my STAR report, did I get my fair share of the market? Did I capture my fair share of the occupancy percentage? Okay, did I capture my fair share based on my competitors? We all have a certain piece of the pie that considers our fair share. Did I get that or did I not get it? And if I didn't get it, why didn't I? Was my rate too high, so my occupancy suffered? Was my rate too low, so my occupancy was super high, but I didn't get my fair share of the ADR compared to my competitors? So that's one thing that I love about Revenue Manager, is that it's not just like, we're gonna make this plan and go like the first quarter of the whole year. It's on a monthly basis. I'm identifying what I need to do to change to be better the next time. All right, so this is the last section right here, is the revenue management. So pretty much the executive leadership of the revenue of the hotel are part of that management meeting process. Because all these other areas, the reservations, the food and beverage manager, sales manager, they're all involved in selling the hotel beyond just the rooms. And so we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. What are our goals for the hotel and how can we help move that forward? Okay. Looking at our forecasts, we want to know how many, knowing how many rooms we have, how many guests we have in-house, allows food and beverage to plan their quantities either for the restaurants or for the banquets. Also allows them to help the staffing of the front desk, staffing of housekeeping, staffing of food and beverage outlets. And so it's really important that everyone kind of keeps up with that. There are daily meetings where we look and kind of see what our 3-day forecast is, any changes or any VIPs that are in-house. We also have weekly meetings. So weekly meetings are going to be looking at 30, 60, 90, and 120 days out. What's our pace of our build? Do we need to change our rate? Talking about it with the leadership of the hotel. And then our monthly is just looking at big picture issues. Okay, what are some things that are going to be coming up? And the last slide. You guys are all happy about this. The last slide, we have our hurdle rate. That's the rate that we want to go over. That's what we want to get to. It's also called our bar rate, which is best available rate. Okay. Best available rate. The minimum length of stay we've already talked about, where we have like a specific number of days they have to stay. And then the last one is close to arrival. Okay. Close to arrival means that we're no longer taking reservations. So it could be that we're sold out. But close to arrival might be an example like, let's say we have a high profile guest in house and we can't sell all of our guest rooms. We need to have some empty, and they need to have like a whole floor for themselves for security issues, whatever. Okay, so that we might close to arrival.
Have you ever did that?
I haven't done it for that purpose, but a lot of hotels right now are doing close to arrival because they don't have enough housekeeping staff to clean the rooms. So on the weekends, they may actually only sell 80% occupancy. Even though they have 20% left that's empty, they don't have the staff to be able to clean that in a timely manner to get those rooms turned over. And so out of respect to the housekeeping team, out of respect to the front desk team, they actually close to arrival at 80%. Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns? I know there's a lot of information. Okay. So on Thursday this week, we will go over chapter 14. That's the last chapter of the textbook. Not really hotel related, it's more like job search kind of related, HR related. That's pretty much all I have for today. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Thank y'all for your attention. Diego, Tawana, and Dorisha, if you want, I can bust out my little grab bag of stuff if you guys want something. If you want something. You're okay, Diego? Do you want to gift your first place prize to somebody else? Okay.
I'll take it.
All right. Yeah, that's all we're doing. Oh, wait, I think I've cut it off here. Yeah, it's over here. Yeah, that's all we have for today. So I'll see you on Thursday. We'll go over chapter 14. And then next week on Tuesday, we'll be at the Grand Hyatt Hotel. Grand Hyatt. Excellent. If you want to come up to room 303, I will see you there.